What do we know, everybody? It is another windy day, but I got all my choring done, made the wife breakfast in bed, and her and little man are laying down trying to take a nap. So I come out here at the shop, and instead of working on the bin output auger behind me, I think that we'll do another story time with Jim. And we will talk about when I went to tech school in Laramie, Wyoming back in 2009. Before I continue, it's a lot of stuff that goes into this. I'm not really going to talk about stuff we did in school because I think that's pretty irrelevant. We'll talk about a lot of the different things like the housing and the people and stuff like that. And for all of you that were techers, drop a comment down below. Let me know what your experience was like because everybody goes through this stuff different. Everybody has different experiences. Even if you went to community college, went to a different school, went to a university, it's still fun to write those things down and to kind of relive them a little bit. Some things more than others. But this whole story starts back in 2008. I graduated high school, and I was really dumb back then. Really stupid. I had an issue with community colleges and with universities for one dumb reason: general studies. I just could not wrap my head around wanting to go and pay to sit through the same type of classes that I just got out of. It's dumb. And looking back now, I should just went to community college. But it is what it is. Everything happens for a reason. If I would have went that route, who knows where I'd be right now. So I'm very happy with the way my life is now. But tech schools appeal to me because you just went and you learned a trade. That's what I wanted to do. So I researched all the tech schools that I could find online, and I finally settled on the one in Laramie. You know who I'm talking about. I don't even know if they're still in business anymore. They had a bunch of lawsuits come up, and I don't know if they finally shut everything down or what this whole deal was, but oh well. But I settled on them for two big reasons. One is they had housing. I did not come from a family that could afford to rent me an apartment. And I also, where this thing was treated like a full-time job every single day, there's no way I could make enough money to afford an apartment. And I am not the best at making friends, and especially some friend that I would be comfortable enough splitting rent with. It is what it is. So I settled on that place for those two reasons. Filled out all the stuff online, and they sent a recruiter to the house, talked to him, and there was one real big sticking point for me that I hated. Is that school made you cut your hair. I was not happy. I brought up the sexism deal. I said, this is ridiculous. You would not make a female do this. But their philosophy was, cut your hair or don't come to school. And if you want to take us to court over a deal, who cares? You're a guy. Nobody's going to let you cry sexism. And oddly enough, and I don't know if this is true or not, I never did research it, but one of my buddies who also had to cut his hair called me sometime after we graduated college. And I don't, excuse me. I don't remember how long it was after we graduated. I knew it was a couple of years at least. But he said some guy ended up taking him to court and did that and won because they were going to make him cut his hair. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I really hope it is true. Because the girls, when we were going to school, they didn't have to abide by the same rules and dress codes as we did. If you were a guy, you had to have short hair. The only facial hair you could have was a mustache. You couldn't have any chin whiskers, a beard, anything like that. Your sideburns had to be trimmed up. You could not have any piercings as a guy whatsoever. No earrings, no nose rings, no nothing. You had tattoos, they were supposed to be covered, but that was about the only rule that they were pretty lax on, which I guess was good. We weren't supposed to wear finger rings, necklaces, things like that. The females, they got away with wearing necklaces, earrings. They got to keep their hair long. They could wear the finger rings. They could keep their shirts untucked. They didn't have to wear the same type of footwear as we did. And we had one gal in our class that had tennis shoes. But us guys, we had to have boots. The shirt always had to be tucked in. I mean, there was a lot of strict rules for us. But it was what it was. I mean, I bit the bullet, donated my hair, and I paid the $100 and some application fee, which most schools I don't think have. At least back then, most schools didn't have it. I was pretty shocked, but whatever. But we were going and trying to get everything set up. My mom was handling all the financial aid stuff. We were on the phone with these people from the school, and they were talking. We were trying to figure out how to get to where we needed to go when we went down there. And the ladies in the office, bless their heart, kept calling Laramie such a small town, and it's not. I'm from a town of 1,100 people in the middle of nowhere. In the middle of nowhere. We got cows and we got corn. I mean, when you're getting directions to go to someplace, you're told to go to the big red building, the building that's fallen down, or go to this old barn and turn here, and you get landmarks. Going there, they're giving us street names, and that's insane to us because this is before GPS was really a deal, and I mean, you don't notice those street signs till you get right up on them. Well, then you can't just jump over in a turn lane. And then you're not used to stoplights. You always had stop signs, so you're used to looking straight ahead instead of up, and it was a big deal. I mean, a lot of you can laugh about it, but coming from where I did, it was a huge change because I'd never seen interstate until that point. So, we get down there to the hotel they recommended we stay in, and this place is disgusting. There's dirt and garbage everywhere. There's bugs in the room. We figure we try to cut our losses and at least go to the swimming pool. We go there. The pool is green. They got mold and algae in the hot tub. This place is terrible. And my mother did end up getting her money back, but she had a fight for quite a while over this whole deal. We went through orientation, and we talked around. I didn't really meet anybody except for one of my collision instructors, because I went for collision refinishing, majored in street rod custom fab. But I mean, we just kind of figured out where the apartments were and got some paperwork, filled some stuff out, and that was that. So we went to the apartments, and my mother, bless her heart, I know why she did it. I don't disagree with how she did it, but it did end up kind of screwing me. Well, she filled this out so I wouldn't have to pay back as much money. So what that meant was I got put into worse apartments. You could either get put in the bad apartments for cheaper, or you get put in the good apartments, the new ones. And these come with a difference in what we call Tecker checks, because most places in Laramie would not hire you. And that's for reasons of something that happened, I believe, back in the 70s. I'm not really going to get into that a whole lot. But they give you Tecker checks. It was in ballpark your student financing deal, and if you lived in the good apartments, you got, I think, $350 a month. And if you lived in the bad apartments, you were supposed to get $500. Well, my mom set it up to where I got less than both of those. And I mean, that's, I don't want to say generational gap, but I know, like, when my mom went to school, she survived on $50 a week to pay for her gas and pay for her food. And back then, that would have done it. But going to school in Laramie, that $300 didn't get you very far. Driving back and forth to school and trying to eat, trying to do all this stuff, and you couldn't leave a bunch of food in your refrigerator because we'd find out there later on that you had roommates that would take that money and take the money their parents were shipping them every month and go out and buy pot or go out and buy these dumb cars, and they would eat everybody else's food. Stupid. But it is what it is. I mean, I survived. Well, we went to these apartments, and we were down in the basement of this thing, and we tried to get in with the key, and the key wouldn't work. So we beat on the door, and finally some dude showed up at the door, and I kid you not, this dude was a spitting image of Tom Green. Only I'm sure Tom Green smelled a whole lot better. This dude did not shower. He was in his mid-30s at the time, did not shower. He was a really nice guy. I don't want to dog on him too much because he was such a nice guy, but he wasn't very bright and he did not shower. And these apartments, they were housing 4 students in a place barely big enough for 2 with rickety bunk beds. And it was not a nice living arrangement at all. So I got stuck in the room with that guy, with Mr. Stinky. And I didn't get any drawers in a dresser. I didn't get anything like that. I was living out of a tote and a bag. It was awful. And he stunk. Like I say, he stunk, and he snored so darn loud. And I know I'm not one to talk, because I know I snore. But that's when I first really figured out I didn't like the whole roommate situation. The other room that was in that apartment, they had another guy I got along with, hardly ever saw. And then I had Josh, Diesel Kid, and I wish I was still in contact with him, because he was such a nice guy. I got along with him so well. He was from Idaho, and our personalities were about the same. We liked the same stuff, come to the same type of families. With the exception of his dad being a chef. This kid was big and he could cook. Very good cook. But I always got along super well with Josh. Super well. But it was just odd. I mean, getting used to the whole roommate thing and trying to deal with all this stuff. And this apartment was disgusting. It was awful. And that Mr. Stinky had a whole that trash cabinet that you got there. It's a big long deal that you could have used for a broom closet in your trash can or whatever. He had it packed full of bags of aluminum cans, because that's what he used, because he usually rephased. So he'd have to go for 6 weeks and then have to spend 6 weeks mooching off of people before he could get back into an apartment to go through the program again. And so those would give him some walk around money. This whole arrangement was just terrible. And then I'm trying to figure out, when I'm first going to school, how to acclimate myself to all of this. Because I grew up in the sticks in Nebraska. There wasn't, we had culture, but nothing like this. These are different walks of life from every part of the country. We had kids from California, Arizona, Colorado. We had one from Canada. Trying to get acclimated to that and these other guys and not wanting to pop them in the mouth. We had a kid from Tennessee that sat at the table next to me at class that I'll just say there was a reason that they were going to kick you out of school if you fought. I wanted to beat the snot out of this kid. He was the most arrogant, trash-talking idiot you'll ever meet in your life. I cannot stand him. I couldn't stand him then. It just makes my blood boil thinking of him now. But I know the first couple of weeks, I was trying to get everything figured out and trying to figure out how to make friends and break my shell apart a little bit because of social anxiety and everything else. But I couldn't figure out how to get anywhere. And if I could get somewhere, I sure wouldn't know how to get back to my apartment. So every day for lunch, I'd go to the car, I'd eat there, and then for supper, I'd end up eating just raisin bread. I didn't know how to get anywhere or do anything. That was the joy of coming from a small town, I guess. But once you kind of got through collision, you started kind of coming into your own. You knew who your friends were, who your clique was going to be. You opened up a little bit more. You grew more as a person, and things got a little easier on that end. You got to where you were able to go out in front of the apartments and talk to these guys, and you were able to finally drive around and figure out how to get places. Well, that's when I started figuring out that if I wore my Tecker shirt into these places, there's a lot of them that would tell me to leave. They wouldn't serve you. Be it a restaurant, even a gas station, they would tell you just to leave. And I will say this, I know there's a lot of people that have vacationed over by Laramie and people that have stayed in there and they thought it was all right or whatever. It is the worst place I've ever lived in my life. I was never treated so poorly by a community in my life. I've never seen anything like it. When I never did anything to anybody and I'm going to get turned away because of where I go to school, where you're literally not going to serve me food or let me pump gas because of that, you're a horrible person. you're a horrible person. I mean, that's like me going into a place and not wanting to help somebody because they got a Yankee hat on because some Yankee fans are bad. The whole Yankees population ain't bad, just a select few fans. It's just horrible. I mean, I equated, let's say, you had a Mexican person in your town and he was an awful person. He stole a lot of different stuff. So all of a sudden you just hate all Mexican people, racist like that. And I know this whole thing ain't the same as racism, but that's what it felt like. Like something's gonna happen way back before my time and you're gonna treat me poorly because of it, and I had no part in it. That's terrible. That is terrible. But we made do. I mean, you go, you get your food, you'd hang out a little bit, and that part was nice because I could work on my socialing, where I could work on the social skills of interacting with these people and learning how to conversate, which helped me in the long run. But once I got peopled out or got overwhelmed, I could just go back down in my little hole. And that was great. My little dirty hole. Well, it come time for my first phase to be up. There we go through collision. Stinky had a rephase, so he had to move out of the apartment, thank goodness. They could finally fumigate that thing. The other guy that was there when we got there, he had to leave 3 weeks before graduation for some personal things at home. And he ended up making a nice career for himself, so good on him. I don't fault his decision whatsoever. He did what he had to do. I support it. Not going to get into that. But through refinishing, through our little second deal there, it was just me and Josh, and that worked out great. Good. I'd cook some stuff, he'd cook some stuff, and everything would go good. We'd both clean, we'd both do this. We made a dish that was dirty, we'd both clean it. We'd take out garbage if it needed taken out. It was a good living arrangement. He got his room, I got my room. Everything worked great. Refinishing, it wasn't all that bad. But the one really bad part of it was, or a couple really bad parts, we had an instructor in there that had no business being an instructor at all. They had no reason to hire this guy. He was the biggest douche, the biggest prick that you'll ever meet. He was awful. His whole philosophy was figuring out any way you could screw the customer out of money. That was what he talked about. That's an awful philosophy to live by. And that is something awful to tell kids in college. He's teaching these guys how to make quality products, do quality work, and help the customer out, not how to screw the customer over. You're not going to keep business that way, and you're not going to keep a job that way. That's terrible. He was impossible to get along with, and we had a couple of guys in our class that called him out on it. But when you called him out on it and you made him mad, he'd tell you to go home. It was just terrible. Horrible. Had another instructor there that he was working. They rotated instructors around through the collision refinishing departments, and then when you weren't going to be an instructor, you worked in one of their shops. Well, he had hurt his arm, so they took one of our good instructors away and they put him in there. And this guy was an idiot. He didn't teach anything. He couldn't tell you to do anything. All he did was talk trash to everybody and try to poke on personal stuff. And I was not happy with this guy. I told him to stop, told him to stop, told him to stop. He wouldn't stop, and I ended up grabbing him by the throat and I put him up against the wall. And, he was mad. He said he was going to get me kicked out of school and everything else. And my lead instructor in refinishing, Frank, he had my back. He told the guy how it was, and nothing ever come of it. Thank goodness. We had collision kids, the new kids that come in for collision. They would go in, and they would go into our tool room. Their instructor would send them over to go grab stuff, and they would grab tools out of there, take it back to the collision site, but they never would bring them back. And the worst part about all this is at the end, the school made us pay for them. Made us in the refinishing side that had nothing to do with what just went on pay for it. It was terrible. It was horrible. They gave you 3 shirts when you started. and those shirts inevitably get ruined, or if the instructors don't like the way they look, they make you go and buy new ones. Make you do it. It was horrible. Horrible. Whatever, we made it through refinishing. Got all our certifications, got all our ICAR stuff, went through all the ICAR welding things, frames, and got the SATA certifications with the painting. We got the EPA stuff. Well, then we were going to the other campus, the new campus. We're going to go there for street rod. Well, this is where things kind of get miserable. Got through collision refinishing. I was a class leader, tool room guy. We did our things, and we went to street rod. And this was an entirely different deal, and I'm very unhappy with a lot of things that happened over there on that campus. And I blame the school wholeheartedly for this. Because you cannot take a guy that worked in a hack body shop whose philosophy was just beat it a little bit, mud it, and send it out the door. A guy who thinks restoration is throwing cardboard behind a cutout panel, mudding over it, painting it, sending it out. That's not a restoration. That's hack work. Always has been, always will be. But you cannot put him in a class like that. You can't put him as an instructor in the first place. You should not hire him. Well, we had a guy in there that knew how to do that stuff. He knew how to use an English wheel, how to use a power hammer, how to make complete parts out of nothing, how to do lead work. He was the old school guy. When he started, he was building stuff for Rolls Royces, and all he had was a wood stump and a mallet and a sandbag. This dude knew his craft, and he was good at it. And I learned everything that I could from this dude. I mean, we had kids in that class that were auto kids that figured out they had it made. They were going to go learn how to work on engines and the auto part of it, and they'd come over there and learn how to do body work, and they would have just the best shop ever. And all these guys figures they were going to get these old cars, slam them full of mud, paint them up real nice, and send them out the door. That is not a restoration. That's what bugs me about a lot of these resto shops, is they're glorified body shops charging a whole lot more for the same work. And sometimes worse quality work than that. But it is what it is. I mean, that's what you get when these auto kids come in and learn about body filler and then get sent out the door. But I learned a lot from that old timer. Learned how to chop, channel, section, learn how to make complete parts by hand, learn how to metal finish big areas. I mean, it was great. That part of it was great. I got a lot of good information in that class. I just didn't, there was a couple instructors that were not good, that should not have been there. Learn how to TIG weld really good. Gas weld real good. Learn how to, went through the same MIG welding deal and everything else. And learn how to do the aluminum TIG and learn how to weld on titanium and zinc and all sorts of crazy stuff. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool. And one of the cool moments in that part of the class was that I got pretty good with the sheet metal fab part of it and the TIG welding and everything else. And I finally figured out, you know what? I want to go build fire trucks because they still do the stuff like that. Well, I started looking around and I emailed Faye Butler. And those of you guys that watch anything with Jesse James or follow anything about sheet metal fabrication, you know who he is. He's the power hammer guy. I mean, I read all of Ron Fournier's books and learned about the English wheel and things like that. Read Covell books. Well, I emailed Faye Butler because I wanted to learn more, and that old boy called me on the phone. And that old-time instructor, I was telling him about that, and that dude was on cloud 9. He was just so excited for me because that was like, it's like a kid who likes basketball getting called by Michael Jordan. I mean, that was cool. It was cool. We had a lot of good experiences like that. But I mean, the worst part about this whole deal, especially that class, was the guy that was in charge of it. This guy was an auto mechanic that got put as the head of the street rod program. And this dude was like 7 foot tall, and he was the biggest a-hole you'll ever meet in your life. I had to go cut my hair 4 times in 1 week because he essentially wanted the back of your head buzzed. He didn't want any length on it whatsoever. If he could grab it, it was too damn long. It is not good, not nice. He was miserable to deal with. Miserable to deal with. I hated that. I hated him. I hated everything about that. But it is what it is. But after going through refinishing with no roommates and having a good time, we got new roommates in. And they came in when we went into street rod. One of them was going to be a diesel kid. The other one that was in my room was going to be a collision kid. And the kid that was in my room was a really nice guy, really nice parents, Mexican kid, come from Cheyenne. But this cat, he couldn't read at all. Really nice kid, really good kid. And I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he's doing well for himself now. But I'm not kidding you at all. He could not read at all. And his mother was explaining that to me when they were moving him in. Said he's got some mental issues. Said he's completely normal. He just can't read. Well, I remember going by the collision class and they were doing the test and they were reading him the stuff. And I just got a kick out of it. They would read him the deal and read him the answers, and he'd just say one of the answers. And they'd say, no, I'll read it again. They would do that repeatedly until he said the right thing. That was just nuts to me. But you know what? I'm a firm believer that a lot of this stuff, you can work with your hands. You can work on a lot of stuff. And you don't always need to be book smart to do it. You don't always need to be able to read and write the best to do it. I can read just fine. My handwriting is garbage, but I can work on stuff. And I have no doubt that this kid could do that. But this kid, I got along with him great. I love this kid. He went home every weekend and whatnot. But he loved pizza. He did. And when he would make his pizza, he would put catsup on it. And that just blew me away. And I always told him he was whiter than me. I mean, white folks are supposed to like ketchup, and I don't put it on anything like that. But his excuse was, well, tomato sauce and ketchup were made out of the same thing. Essentially the same thing in his eyes. Whatever. We had another kid that come in the diesel program. We called him Texas Boy. And the way this kid described it was if you got caught up on a drug charge or something like that down there and you were close enough to being a minor that you could go to college and they would wipe that off your record. You wouldn't have to do jail time, wouldn't have to pay a fine. It would be like it never happened. So he figured, well, 9 months out of my life, that ain't bad. So his parents set all this stuff up, and his parents were loaded. They were rich. They sent him a ton of money all the time. And this kid went and bought just some POS car. And he would go out every night and get trashed and go buy a bunch of pot. And you weren't supposed to have alcohol or anything in the dorms, and he had it just piled up in a suitcase in there. And this kid would come home at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and just blare the TV, and he would eat everybody's food. Everybody's food. Like, this kid was a skinny drink of water, and he would eat everything in the house. It was just awful. He was miserable to deal with. And we couldn't fight it. I mean, that was the one thing that just bugged me. We could scream at him till we're blue in the face. He wouldn't do anything, wouldn't do any chores, wouldn't do anything because he didn't have to do that back home. His parents were rich. He had people doing that for him. He thought the school, that's what he said, is he thought the school supplied the food that was in the fridges. Just dumb. I couldn't stand this kid. And this is the one thing that I could not stand horribly about this place, about this school, is they had a guy that they called him the head of security. And he's supposed to go around to all the dorms, look at everything, make sure everything's upkept, and make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. If he got wind of stuff like this, like how that kid was, He would avoid you. He would avoid your place because he would have to do work. He would have to do paperwork. He would have to go through and search stuff and then go through a paperwork process of kicking this kid out. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do anything. I talked to everybody in that school, everybody higher up that I could. My mother called. Still, nothing ever happened. But that security guy, that old tubby boy, ended up coming and talking to me and said, well, your problem resolved itself. The kid's moving out of the apartment in 2 weeks. I was graduating in 3. Stupid. Stupid. It was just miserable the whole way around, every way you looked at it. That apartment was garbage. The training you received there, the certification, stuff like that, that was pretty cool, but most of the instructors were not where they should have been. They had good instructors in that school, and if they could put them together, they would have had a great program. But you're hiring these guys off the street because they have so much experience, and they're idiots. They can't teach, and they couldn't do the work in the first place. Like taking a guy that was filling holes in body panels with body filler and put him as one of the head guys in the street rod program. Why? It's dumb. The hair policy was dumb. That guy you put in the head of the street rod program that wanted you to buzz your head, otherwise it was too long for him, that was stupid. Made the lives of a lot of people really miserable. But I will say this about my time there. As miserable as it was, as much as I hated that town, as miserable as that town treated me and everybody else there, as much as I hated 98% of the students I come into contact with, I did learn a few things. One, you don't trust people. We had a big Indian dude. The reservation paid for him to go to school. And this guy showed up first day of class with a big old mohawk. He was a really good dude, really nice guy. But I come from middle of nowhere where you help people out. Somebody's hungry, you feed them. So we taught this big old Indian dude, or he would go around and he'd say, hey, when I get my Tecker check, I'll pay you. So you take him out and you take him to Little Caesars, get him a $5 pizza. Take him to McDonald's, get him something off the dollar menu. Well, everybody learned out pretty quick that you don't get paid. He don't pay you back. He's just mooching. So you know what we did? Instead of getting mad and chewing his backside about that, we learned that we weren't going to trust anybody, that we weren't going to help people out like that on the daily. We taught that old boy how to save money and how to make fried bologna sandwiches. He had never heard of a fried bologna sandwich. And this big old Indian dude, really good dude, he ate those for every meal. He thought they were the best thing he had ever seen. Fried bologna. He just thought they were great. It was just nuts. We had, in refinishing, there's this black kid. I think he was from Texas. And his Corey was his name. And he come in, he looked like a straight banger. He had the pants sagging down, the boots weren't tied, had a little do-rag on his head, and he was walking around like a tough little drink of water. And at this point, I'm like, you know what? The heck with it. I'm going to try to be friends with this guy. Started talking to him. That old boy was pretty cool. He'd been in jail. He'd been out of jail for so long trying to rebuild his life, decided to go to school and everything else. Really nice guy. Really nice dude. I got along with him great. Growing up in middle of nowhere in Nebraska, I was the only one around that listened to death metal. And even now, I live in the sticks. I wear a cowboy hat every day. I wear Wranglers. I wear boots. I can listen to old country music, but you know what else I listen to? Death metal, brutal death metal. I never met anybody else that did. Going to school there, I did. My buddy Jake from South Dakota, his buddy Dana. They all listen to death metal. That was great. It was nice being able to find somebody that was kind of like yourself. There's a couple Nebraska kids there. You never met them in your life. You start talking to them, and you you created this bond with these people. There was a lot of them you didn't like, but the ones that you did, you stuck with. The town didn't have your back. There was nobody in town that was going to help you. 90% of the kids in the apartments or at the school weren't going to help you. Most of the instructors or any of the administrative staff, they sure weren't going to help you. But you made your click. My buddy Troy down in El Paso, Texas, I think he's married now. He has his first child. Really good dude. Still friends with him to this day. I mean, that was great. I mean, the school helped me out a lot more on the social aspect than anything else because it was able to make it to where I could communicate, get over that social anxiety a little bit, be able to make friends and be able to learn stuff and take pride in what you do. Would I have had a better time at a community college? You bet. Would I have learned better with the slower pace community college? Probably. I'm still proud of my accomplishments and everything else, but I still learned quite a bit. Was it worth the price of admission? Certainly not. 100%. No way. Not a chance. It was not like the pictures and videos said. It was not like they billed it to be. It was not worth the money that I spent to go there. It wasn't worth the torture of the 9 months living in those apartments, dealing with that community, dealing with the other kids. It wasn't worth dealing with that disgusting apartment and the people in the staff or in the front office that wouldn't do anything about it. It wasn't worth dealing with the mess that we had to deal with Texas Boy. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it at all. It wasn't worth dealing with that instructor that I had to put up against the wall because he was telling jokes about my mother. It wasn't worth that prick in Street Rod that complained because your hair was too long because it wasn't buzzed. It wasn't worth that. It wasn't worth being forced to pay for tools that another class took. It was not worth that. It wasn't worth being told to go screw a customer because that's how you're going to make a lot of money. It wasn't worth that. It was a miserable 9 months from start to finish. I am grateful for everything that I learned there, and I think I'm better for some of the stuff that I went through. Would I do it again? Not a chance. There is no way. I mean, I agree with tech schools. I believe that they have a place. I believe that there's a lot of good things that can come from them. However, you got to be selective on your instructors, and you got to keep up on them. That school could have been something really, really great if you put the right people in control. It could have been really great if you got the guys in there that knew what they were doing. But in no remote world should you be putting a guy that fills holes in body panels with cardboard and body filler as a head of a street rod program or as one of the lead instructors. You should not be putting a guy in any program who is trying to teach students how to take advantage of customers. There's no place for that. If you turn out to be that kind of person when you get out in the real world, that's on you. But you should not be taught how to do that in school. When you go to school, you're supposed to be learning how to do things the right way and the proper way and the honorable way, I guess would be a good way to put it. You didn't learn that. We learned a lot of really good things. We learned a lot of really bad things. And it wasn't great. I mean, how they build, how you were going to work on this stuff and do this stuff, it wasn't done that way. I mean, then refinishing, instead of being taught how to repair a broken part and then blend into a door and how to do all of that, you stripped the car completely down, you painted the thing complete. And you did your let down panels and everything else, learn how to use a paint gun, and learn about pigments and things like that, but it was still not what it could have been. I mean, when you go to school for collision repair, you should be going to learn how to fix collision damage. And you learn how to fix dents, you learn how to do frame repairs and things like that, but it still would have been great if we could have worked on, you could say deer collisions or say a T-bone or something like that. Instead of just learning about these machines, learn how to do little things on these machines and learning how they work, I believe somebody learns more, especially in a technical school, working on the real deal than they would learn off of just learning how something works. You know what I mean? You know, instead of cutting off a rocker panel and then putting the rocker panel back on, it'd be great to learn something that has been messed up, beat up. And we really didn't get that. I mean, like, I understand you got such a flow of kids through there that you're just gonna take these junk cars and that's what you're gonna do. I mean, the rep told me that they take cars in collisions, they beat them up, they cut them up, the guys go with big sledgehammers and beat the snot out of everything, and you learn how to fix all these cars. The auto kids get the engines, they get the cars in running order, you get the cars all repaired, and then you take it for refinishing, you paint the cars, and they sell them. That is not how that worked. That is not how that worked at all. I am very disappointed in that. That was lying. And I'm guessing the front office lied to him. And it is what it is. Like I say, there's a reason that school isn't there anymore. It is what it is. I mean, what should I have done? I should have went to a community college, maybe went for diesel mechanics or something like that. But that's the more you know. I mean, I wouldn't have known that back then. Dad was a body man. I'd work on cars with him. I know I semi-enjoyed it. And once I went through school, I enjoyed it a little less. And once I got in the real world and got treated how I did at the body shop, I grew to hate it. Now it don't bother me so much, but I'd rather work on something with an engine, diesel engine. I mean, all those years of pulling bull rack and driving a truck, you learn how to work on those things. That is a lot more fun to me than trying to work on one of these new cars like the wife has. It's bigger. Guys like big trucks, big engines. It's a lot more fun for me. But you live and learn. I'm grateful for all the stuff I know how to do. And I mean, I can use a paint gun, I can work on body panels, I can work on a lot of wiring issues. And that serves me well with a lot of different things, especially out on the farm. But it is what it is. I mean, all in all, if I could give that school a rating for what they were trying to teach us, I'd give them an 8 out of 10. For the certifications I got, I'd give them a 9 out of 10. For some of the instructors, like that old timer that worked on Rolls Royces and knew how metal worked, I give that guy a 20 out of 10. He's that good. He was that good. And there's other instructors, I'll give them that rating too. And there's other instructors, I'd give them a negative rating if I could. My overall experience there with just the school, not the housing, just the school, I give them maybe a 2 or 3 out of 10. The housing, I give them negatives. That was awful. What I had to go through. And when you're trying to go up the ladder and nobody cares, that shows they just want that turnaround. They just want to run you through there like cattle and get as many in as they can and get as many out as they can. They don't care. And then we figured out that their placement rate, how they do that with, they give you a placement rating for kids that graduate and get into careers of their choice. If you do anything that could even remotely pertain to a vehicle, they count that. So like say you went to school for an auto mechanic and you end up having to go work at a truck wash because you can't get a job or hold a job, they still count that as a success. You line their pocketbook, they sent you out the door, you get to see cars on a basis, some kind of basis. It's dumb. It's dumb how they set that up. It was a scam then. It is what it is. Community college would have been a better deal. It would have worked out better for me socially, financially, and, well, it gave me a better understanding of a lot of different things as far as the real world is concerned, because you would have been working on actual problems rather than learning about the problems and then working on stuff that don't pertain to it. But it is what it is. It is what it is. It was miserable. It wasn't fun. I was very proud of what I did, what I accomplished, what I learned. I got my first tattoo, which is my last name right there. Got that at Time Tattoo while I was in Laramie, and I'm not happy with the needle size they used, but I'm very happy with how it come out. And the guy that did it, really good at what he did. They had another guy there that was a graphics guy. He was really good. Really nice people, the two of them. Who knows if they're still in business or not, but I get along with those guys pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of things that helped me grow as a person there, and there was a lot of things that kind of messed me up. Grew to hate people. Learned real quick that I didn't like roommates and I was never gonna have one. I learned that I liked being by myself. I didn't want to be with friends. I just wanted to be in my own little world, doing what I could to better myself in my future. And I think that probably helped me out with my work ethic going forward. But it is what it is. I've wasted so much of your time, guys, just rambling on and ranting about this whole deal. I hope you stuck around to the end. Like I say, drop a comment down low with your experience at whatever school you went to, whether you were a tech or a Laramie, went to a different tech school, maybe you went to a community college, university, what have you. Let me know how it all was. You know, be it a roommate situation or instructors or anything like that. But as always, guys, I love making these videos. You guys make my day when you watch these things, especially when you watch to the end, when you like them, comment, whatever. But as always, guys, I thank y'all for watching.